I'm Garrett, 34, and I've been hiding a secret from my family for years. I'm worth over $5 million. Nobody knew until my golden child brother Thomas hired a private investigator to dig into my finances. Growing up, I was always second best to him, but I silently built a tech company while living in a modest apartment. When Thomas discovered my wealth, my parents suddenly became very interested in my life, and what they're doing now is absolutely unbelievable. Before I dive into this wild journey, let me know where you're watching from and if your family has ever invaded your privacy? Like and subscribe if you've ever had to hide your success from someone. Growing up in our middle-class Milwaukee suburb, it was crystal clear who held the spotlight in our family: my brother Thomas. 3 years older, naturally athletic, and blessed with the kind of charisma that made everyone gravitate toward him, Thomas was the undisputed favorite of our parents, Margaret and Howard. Our childhood home wasn't lavish, but it was comfortable enough. Dad worked as a sales manager at a local manufacturing company, while Mom taught 3rd grade at the elementary school. They provided for us, but there was always a noticeable difference in how resources were allocated between Thomas and me. When Thomas made the varsity football team as a sophomore, my parents spent nearly $800 on premium equipment, top-of-the-line cleats, the newest helmet model, and personalized gear. The same month, when I qualified for the state mathematics competition, I had to beg for $50 to cover the registration fee. Mom eventually relented, sighing as she wrote the check, saying, "I suppose this computer stuff might lead to a decent job someday." This pattern repeated throughout our childhood. Thomas's room was decorated with trophies, pennants, and memorabilia from his sporting achievements. My academic certificates were stuffed in a drawer, occasionally acknowledged with a distracted, "Good job, buddy," from Dad when he passed me in the hallway. For my 12th birthday, I asked for a programming book and some basic computer equipment. What I got was a second-hand desktop that constantly overheated. Meanwhile, Thomas received a brand new mountain bike for no special occasion, just because. He'd been eyeing it for a while. Mom justified it by saying, "Your brother needs to stay active for his athletics. Your computer things are just hobbies." Despite the obvious favoritism, I found refuge in the digital world. By 14, I'd built my first website for a local bakery, earning $200 that I secretly saved. My parents barely noticed when I mentioned it at dinner, as Thomas was regaling them with stories about being scouted by college coaches. High school only widened the divide. Thomas was football captain, prom king, and voted most likely to succeed. I was president of the computer club, but that didn't make the family photo album. When Thomas received a partial athletic scholarship to Vanderbilt University, my parents threw an extravagant party, inviting neighbors, friends, and even distant relatives. Mom cried happy tears, telling everyone, "We always knew he was destined for greatness." When my acceptance letter to Wisconsin State arrived with a merit scholarship covering 75% of tuition, there was no party. Dad glanced at the letter, nodded, and said, "At least you won't cost us too much." That night, I heard them discussing how they'd help Thomas with his remaining college expenses, despite my scholarship saving them considerably more money. Through college, I worked part-time at the campus IT department while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. Thomas joined a fraternity, maintained AC average, and called home weekly for additional spending money. Every call ended with Mom asking if he needed anything else, while my parents often forgot to return my messages. Thomas's graduation was a family event. My parents rented a luxurious vacation home near campus for the weekend, hosted a catered dinner for 20 of Thomas's friends, and gifted him a certified Rolex watch. For my graduation, they drove up for the day, took me to Olive Garden, and gave me a card containing a $100 gift certificate to Men's Warehouse for interview suits. Despite everything, I maintained a cordial relationship with my family. I showed up for Christmas gatherings, listened to Thomas's endless stories about his sales job at a pharmaceutical company, and nodded along as my parents beamed at his every word. I learned to expect little acknowledgement, and found peace in the quiet knowledge that I was building something for myself. After 2 years working for a tech firm in Milwaukee, I saved enough for a move to Austin at 26. The tech scene there was booming, and I had ideas that needed the right environment to grow. When I announced my relocation plans at Sunday dinner, Mom looked concerned and said, "Isn't that a bit far? What if it doesn't work out?" Dad added, "There's a reason people stick close to home, son." Thomas, who had moved just 30 minutes away from our parents, laughed and said, "Computer geeks in Texas? Good luck with that, little brother." My parents chuckled along with him, completely unaware that this dismissal was fueling a determination that would ultimately change all our lives. The day I left for Austin, only Mom came to say goodbye. Dad was attending one of Thomas's company softball games. She hugged me briefly and said, "Call when you get settled, and remember you can always come back home." Her tone suggested she was already planning for my failure and return. What none of them knew was that I wasn't just leaving. I was about to prove everything they assumed about me wrong. The Austin tech scene embraced me in ways my family never had. Within 6 months of arriving, I connected with like-minded developers and security specialists who saw potential in my ideas for advanced encryption protocols. We formed a small team, working nights and weekends in my apartment, while I maintained a day job as a systems analyst. Our startup, SecureEdge, focused on developing cybersecurity solutions for small to medium businesses, an underserved market segment that couldn't afford enterprise-level protection but desperately needed better security than off-the-shelf software. The first year was brutal: 18-hour days, ramen noodle dinners, and the constant stress of dwindling savings. By year 2, we had a viable product and our first paying clients. I reinvested every penny back into the company, living as frugally as when I first arrived in Texas. My apartment remained sparsely furnished. I kept driving my 2008 Honda Civic with over 150,000 miles on it, and my wardrobe consisted mainly of free t-shirts from tech conferences. During those first intense years, communication with my family dwindled to occasional phone calls. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Mom would ask if I was still doing okay with the computer job. Dad would briefly say hello before handing the phone back, and inevitably they'd gush about Thomas's latest promotion or bonus. I never mentioned SecureEdge, knowing they wouldn't understand or show interest. The breakthrough came during our 4th year. Our client base had grown steadily, and our reputation for reliable, user-friendly security solutions caught the attention of industry leaders. When CyberShield, a major tech company, approached us with an acquisition offer, I could barely believe the number: $8 million, with potential performance bonuses that could add another $2 million. After weeks of negotiations, due diligence, and sleepless nights, the deal closed. My share, as majority founder, came to just over $5 million after taxes. The money hit my account on a Tuesday morning in March. I stared at the balance for nearly an hour, then went to work as usual, telling no one except my best friend Devin, who had been my emotional support throughout the journey. "You should celebrate," Devin insisted over beers that night. "Buy something crazy. At least upgrade your apartment." I shook my head. "I don't need to broadcast this. I'm happy with my life as it is." The truth was, I'd learned to find satisfaction in building something valuable rather than in showing off success. I moved to a slightly better apartment, invested most of the money with a financial advisor, and continued living modestly. To anyone observing my daily life, I appeared to be a typical successful but not wealthy tech worker. 3 months after the acquisition, Thomas unexpectedly called. "Little brother! It's been too long. I'm going to be in Austin next week for a conference. Let's catch up." His sudden interest surprised me. We hadn't spoken directly in over a year. When he arrived, his eyes scanned my apartment with obvious disappointment. "This is cozy," he said, emphasizing the word in a way that made it sound like an insult. "I thought tech guys made decent money these days." I shrugged. "It suits my needs." Throughout dinner, Thomas asked probing questions about my work, my income, and my future plans, topics he'd never shown interest in before. When I remained vague, His friendly facade slipped slightly. "Dad and Mom worry about you," he said, swirling his third glass of expensive bourbon I was paying for. "Living so far away, no girlfriend, working for what, some small company. They think you're wasting your potential." I changed the subject, but Thomas's visit left me uneasy. 2 weeks later, I received a notification that someone had performed a credit check in my name without authorization. The following month, mail arrived that appeared to have been opened and resealed. Then came the most disturbing incident. After installing a security camera in my home office, ironically using our own company's technology, I reviewed footage from a day when Thomas had stopped by while in town again. The video clearly showed him entering my office, photographing documents on my desk, and attempting to access my computer. I confronted him on the phone that evening. "Why were you going through my private papers, Thomas? What are you talking about?" His denial was immediate, but I could hear the tension in his voice. "I have security cameras, Thomas. I saw you." A long pause followed. "You're being paranoid. This is why Mom and Dad worry about you. You're becoming some kind of recluse with cameras spying on your own family." Despite the evidence I described, he maintained his innocence, growing increasingly agitated until finally exploding. "You know what? Keep your secrets. Everyone will know the truth soon enough." He hung up abruptly, leaving me wondering what exactly he meant by the truth. I didn't have to wonder long. 3 days later, while checking a rarely used email account, I found a message that would change everything. The sender's address was unfamiliar, but the subject line froze me in place. "Surveillance report, Garrett Miller." The email contained a single attachment, a 27-page PDF document labeled Confidential Client Report. With growing disbelief, I opened the file to find a comprehensive investigation into my financial and professional life. The document included bank statements, property records, corporate filings, and even photographs of me entering and exiting my office building on various dates. Most disturbing was the section detailing the SecureEdge acquisition, complete with the exact amount I'd received and how I'd distributed the funds across various investment accounts. Information that only someone with access to my private financial records could possibly know. My hands trembled as I scrolled through page after page of my private life laid bare. At the bottom of the email was a simple message. "Thought you should see what your brother requested. Not all PIs lack ethics." Whoever sent this, presumably the investigator Thomas had hired, had apparently developed a conscience after completing the job. I immediately ran a trace on the email address, using skills from my security background. Through digital breadcrumbs and metadata in the document, I confirmed 2 things. The report was authentic, and Thomas had indeed commissioned it 3 months ago. The violation felt physical, as if someone had broken into my home and rifled through every drawer and cabinet. My privacy, something I'd always valued, had been systematically invaded by my own brother. For what? Money he didn't even know I had until he hired someone to spy on me? As the initial shock subsided, my phone rang. Thomas's name flashed on the screen. With a deep breath, I answered. "I know about the private investigator," I said before he could speak. A moment of silence followed, then a harsh laugh. "So someone sent you the report? Doesn't matter. I already got what I needed." "Why would you do this?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Because you've been hiding things from your family for years." Thomas's voice rose. "Living in that crappy apartment, driving that old car, acting like you're barely getting by, while sitting on millions. What kind of person does that to their family?" The conversation quickly spiraled into a heated argument about family loyalty and obligations. Thomas's sense of entitlement was staggering. "You think you did this all on your own?" he demanded. "Who paid for your education? Who put food on the table while you were growing up? You owe us." "I had a scholarship," I reminded him. "And I worked through college while you were getting constant cash infusions from Mom and Dad." "That's different," Thomas snapped. "I was their investment. And now that one of their investments finally paid off, you're hoarding it all for yourself." It's selfish, Garrett. Plain and simple. Before I could respond, Thomas delivered the final blow. Anyway, Mom and Dad know everything now. They're pretty hurt that you've been deceiving them all these years. My stomach dropped. You told them? Of course I did. They're your parents. They deserve to know their son is a millionaire who doesn't care enough to help them out. After the call ended, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. Within hours, my phone lit up with a video call request from my parents, something that had never happened before. Taking a deep breath, I accepted. Mom's face appeared first, her expression a practiced mix of hurt and disappointment. Dad leaned into frame beside her, looking uncharacteristically interested in speaking with me. Garrett, honey, Mom began, her voice gentler than I'd heard in years. We just want to understand why you didn't tell us about your success. We're so proud of you. The sudden pride, after years of indifference, rang hollow. Dad nodded vigorously. Son, what you've accomplished is impressive. I always knew you had potential with those computers. This revisionist history was jarring. Dad had never expressed any faith in my career path. Not once. As the conversation progressed, their questions became increasingly focused on the financial aspects of my success. Mom casually mentioned concerns about their retirement savings being not quite what they'd hoped. Dad brought up how Thomas was between opportunities, after leaving his pharmaceutical sales job to pursue entrepreneurial ventures. He has such brilliant business ideas. Mom gushed. He just needs initial investors who really believe in him. The subtext was clear as crystal. My newly discovered wealth was seen as a solution to their problems. Problems they hadn't bothered to share until learning about my financial status. Before ending the call, Mom mentioned they were thinking of visiting Austin soon. We really should see where our successful son lives, she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. And we have so much to catch up on. After hanging up, I sat back, feeling a strange mix of emotions. The parents who had barely acknowledged my existence for years were suddenly intensely interested in my life. The brother who had always looked down on me was now fixated on my finances. I wanted to believe their renewed interest came from a place of genuine care, that perhaps this revelation could heal our fractured relationship. But as I replayed the conversation in my mind, focusing on their careful phrasing and strategic mentions of financial concerns, a sinking feeling told me this was just the beginning of something far more complicated. The barrage began subtly. A text from Mom about a doctor's appointment led to mentions of expensive specialists not covered by insurance. Dad called to catch up, but steered the conversation toward their dwindling retirement accounts and rising healthcare costs. Each communication felt calculated, designed to elicit financial support without directly asking. 2 weeks after discovering Thomas's investigation, I received an elaborate business proposal via email. Thomas had created a 40-page document outlining his vision for Miller Family Enterprises, a vague conglomerate that would apparently invest in multiple high-growth sectors. The proposal requested an initial investment of $750,000 with me listed as silent partner, while Thomas would serve as CEO with a generous salary package. When I didn't immediately respond, the calls began. Thomas phoned daily, his tone shifting from excited entrepreneur to increasingly agitated. This is a chance to create a real family legacy, he insisted during one call. Don't you want to help your family succeed? I need to think about it, I replied cautiously. What's there to think about? You have the money sitting there doing nothing. It's not doing nothing, Thomas. It's carefully invested. His voice hardened. So you'll invest in strangers but not your own brother? That's cold, Garrett. Really cold. When avoidance tactics failed to deter Thomas, I finally told him directly that I wouldn't be investing in his vague business concept. His response was immediate and venomous. You'll regret this, he seethed. Family is supposed to support each other. You've changed, Garrett. Money has made you selfish. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. Throughout our lives, Thomas had received endless support from our parents while I'd learned to stand on my own. Now that I had something he wanted, my independence was labeled as selfishness. As if coordinated, my parents intensified their efforts after Thomas's failed pitch. Mom called in tears one evening, claiming she needed specialized medical treatments for a thyroid condition. The treatment, conveniently, would cost approximately $45,000 and wasn't covered by insurance. Concerned, I researched the procedures she described and discovered that standard treatments for her condition were indeed covered by Medicare, which she qualified for. When I gently mentioned this, suggesting she get a second opinion, her tears dried up remarkably quickly. "I didn't realize you were a medical expert now," she said coldly. "I guess money really does change people." Dad took a different approach, expressing sudden interest in my investment strategies. "I've been thinking about your financial situation," he began during one call. "Your mother and I could really use some advice on managing our retirement. Maybe you could share your portfolio details? Or better yet, perhaps you could manage some investments for us?" The requests grew more frequent and less subtle. My parents mentioned house repairs, debt consolidation, and even vacation plans in ways that hinted at expected financial assistance. When these hints didn't produce results, the emotional manipulation intensified. "After all we sacrifice for you children," Mom said during one particularly tense call, "I never thought we'd be struggling while our son sits on millions." The most surprising development came when relatives I barely spoke to began reaching out. Aunt Deborah, my father's sister whom I hadn't seen in years, called to say she was passing through Austin and wanted to reconnect. Over an awkward lunch, she asked numerous questions about my work and living situation before casually mentioning her son's college tuition struggles. After she left, I received a text from my cousin Bradley. "Sorry about Mom. They all know about your money now." Thomas told everyone at the last family gathering. The realization that my financial status had become family gossip was infuriating. My privacy hadn't just been violated by Thomas's investigation. The results had been broadcast to every relative with a potential need for money. Later that week, Thomas called again, his tone surprisingly conciliatory. "Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot with the business proposal," he said. "But I've been thinking, remember that website you built for the school fundraiser when we were kids? That was technically our first business collaboration. It was a volunteer project for the school." I corrected him. "Still, we worked on it together. I provided the concept and marketing, you did the technical stuff. In a way, that early experience probably contributed to your later success." The conversation left me uneasy, but I didn't understand its purpose until 3 days later when I received a letter from an attorney representing Thomas, claiming he was entitled to compensation for his foundational contributions to my technical career and his intellectual property input during early joint ventures. The absurdity would have been laughable if it wasn't so disturbing. Thomas was actually threatening legal action based on a school project from nearly 20 years ago that he had barely participated in. When I didn't respond to the letter, the pressure tactics escalated further. My parents began calling mutual family friends, telling them I had abandoned the family after becoming successful. Thomas posted vague social media comments about forgotten roots and wealth-changing people. The constant pressure began affecting my daily life. I had trouble sleeping, found myself checking my security cameras frequently, and started screening all calls. During a particularly difficult week, I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Winters, who helped me recognize the patterns of emotional manipulation I'd normalized throughout my life. "What you're describing sounds like financial abuse," she explained during one session. "They're using emotional leverage to attempt to control your resources." "But they're family," I said, voicing the thought that kept me answering their calls despite everything. "Family relationships should be based on mutual respect and love, not extraction and obligation," she replied. "The question to ask yourself is, if they weren't related to you, would you accept this behavior from anyone else?" The answer, of course, was no. Yet the programming ran deep, the lifetime of seeking approval from parents who had always prioritized Thomas, the ingrained belief that family loyalty trumped personal boundaries. Breaking free of these patterns wasn't easy, but the escalating demands were making it necessary. My anxiety peaked when I discovered my parents had requested my credit report using my social security number, information they must have obtained from Thomas's investigation. This wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore, it was verging on identity theft. As I struggled with setting boundaries while managing the increasing pressure, I didn't realize that the situation was about to reach a breaking point that would force me to make decisions I'd been avoiding for weeks. The morning started like any other. I left for the gym at 6:30 a.m., planning to return for a 9 a.m. video conference. The workout helped clear my mind, temporarily pushing away the family stress that had consumed my thoughts for weeks. As I approached my apartment door at 8:15, I noticed something odd. The security system showed the door had been unlocked 20 minutes earlier. I hesitated, then cautiously entered. Voices from my home office made me freeze in the hallway. "There must be more documentation somewhere," my father's voice said. "Bank statements, investment accounts, something." "Howard, hurry up," my mother replied. "He usually works out for an hour. We don't have much time." I stood perfectly still, processing the fact that my parents had somehow obtained a key to my apartment and were currently searching through my private documents. Anger, disbelief, and a strange sense of clarity washed over me simultaneously. I stepped into the doorway of my office. Mom was rifling through my desk drawer while Dad examined papers from my filing cabinet. They both looked up, startled. "What are you doing in my apartment?" My voice was eerily calm. Mom recovered first. "Garrett! We were going to surprise you. We flew in last night and thought we'd wait for you here. By breaking in and searching my office?" Dad straightened, his expression shifting from shock to defiance. "We're your parents. We have a right to know what's going on in your life, especially when you've been hiding things from us for years." "No, you don't. You have absolutely no right to invade my privacy like this." "Privacy?" Dad scoffed. "Between family members? That's just an excuse to keep secrets." Mom's approach shifted immediately to tears. "We're just worried about you, sweetheart. Living alone, keeping your success hidden, it's not healthy. We're trying to help." The manipulation was so transparent now that Dr. Winters had helped me recognize the patterns. "This isn't helping. This is breaking and entering." "Don't be dramatic," Dad snapped. "We're your parents, not criminals. How did you get in here?" They exchanged glances before Mom admitted. "Thomas had a key made when he visited last. He was concerned about you living alone with no emergency contacts nearby." The violation felt like a physical blow. Thomas had not only invaded my privacy through the investigation but had created unauthorized access to my home. "I want you to leave. Now." My voice remained steady despite the storm of emotions. Mom's tears intensified. "We flew all this way to see you. We haven't even had breakfast together. You flew here to search my apartment while you thought I was gone. There's a difference." As I escorted them out, I noticed an envelope on the kitchen counter, papers partially visible inside. I grabbed it before they could, pulling out what appeared to be credit card applications in my name, already partially completed. "Were you planning to open accounts in my name?" I asked, holding up the papers. Dad had the audacity to look indignant. "Your mother needs those specialized treatments I mentioned. Since you weren't offering to help, we thought we'd make it easier for you to assist with the expenses." "By committing identity theft?" "It's not theft when it's family helping family," Mom insisted. "We raised you, Garrett. We sacrificed for years to give you opportunities." The conversation devolved from there, with my parents alternating between righteous indignation at being mistrusted and tearful appeals to family obligation. I remained firm, escorting them out and informing them I would be changing my locks immediately. The next morning, Thomas arrived unannounced at my door, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing what he probably thought was his most professional suit. "We need to talk business," he announced, pushing past me into the apartment. "I've brought a revised proposal and partnership agreement for Miller Family Enterprises." Before I could respond, my parents appeared behind him. This had clearly been planned as a coordinated ambush. For the next 2 hours, I endured what felt like a bizarre intervention where I was positioned as the problem that needed fixing. Thomas presented his updated business plan, now requesting only $500,000 as initial seed funding, while my parents outlined their retirement needs and medical expenses. "We're not asking for handouts," Dad insisted. "These are investments in your family's future." The breaking point came when Thomas, frustrated by my continued resistance, pulled out his final weapon. "By the way, I contacted CyberShield last week," he said casually. "Had a great conversation with their acquisition team." I stared at him. "You did what?" "I explained that as your brother and early collaborator in your technical development, I wanted to verify certain aspects of the acquisition deal. They were very interested to hear about my contributions to your early work." The threat was clear. He was positioning himself to challenge the acquisition terms by claiming involvement he never had. "That's fraud, Thomas," I said quietly. "You had nothing to do with Secure Edge." He shrugged. "It's my word against yours. And family business ventures can get complicated legally. Much better for everyone if we resolve this between ourselves." After several more tense exchanges, my family finally left when I threatened to call building security. As the door closed behind them, Thomas turned back with a parting shot. "You know, I never actually thought those computer games you played would amount to anything," he said, his voice slurred slightly from the drinks he'd consumed during our meeting. "Dad always said you were wasting your potential. Turns out you just got lucky with some tech nonsense anyone could have come up with." After they left, I sank onto my couch, physically and emotionally exhausted. The family I had spent a lifetime seeking approval from had just revealed how conditional their love truly was. The brother I had grown up with was threatening legal action based on fabricated claims. The parents who should have protected me were attempting to exploit me financially. I called Devin, the only person I truly trusted, and he came over immediately. As I recounted the day's events, his expression shifted from concern to outrage. "This isn't normal family behavior, Garrett," he said firmly. "What they're doing is abusive, possibly criminal. You need to protect yourself, legally and emotionally." As the reality of the situation sank in, I realized Devin was right. This wasn't just a family disagreement that would blow over. The people who should have cared about me most were showing that they valued access to my money above any genuine relationship. For the first time since this ordeal began, I allowed myself to cry, mourning not just the current situation, but the family relationship I had always longed for and never truly had. The morning after the ambush, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. The path forward wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I made 2 appointments that would change the course of this family crisis, one with Dr. Winters, my therapist, and another with Patricia Alvarez, a family law attorney recommended by a colleague. Dr. Winters helped me work through the emotional turmoil of the previous day. "What you're feeling, the grief, the anger, the sense of betrayal, these are all normal responses to abnormal behavior," she explained. "Setting boundaries isn't rejecting your family. It's establishing the conditions under which you're willing to have a relationship." The meeting with Attorney Alvarez was equally illuminating but in different ways. After reviewing the details of Thomas's investigation, my parents' unauthorized entry, and the attempted identity theft, she didn't mince words. "What you're describing includes several potentially criminal actions," she said. "At minimum, we're talking about invasion of privacy, unauthorized access to financial information, and attempted identity fraud. You have grounds for legal action if you choose to pursue it." I didn't want to file criminal charges against my own family, but I needed protection. With Alvarez's guidance, I implemented a comprehensive security plan. First, I placed credit freezes with all major bureaus to prevent unauthorized accounts from being opened in my name. Next, I moved my investments to new accounts with enhanced security protocols and verbal passwords. The physical security of my home became a priority as well. I changed the locks, upgraded to a more sophisticated security system, and arranged to move to a secured building with doorman service within 30 days. With these measures in place, I drafted a clear, firm email to my family outlining my boundaries going forward. I value family relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. Recent events have demonstrated that my boundaries have not been respected. Going forward, I will not discuss my finances with any family member. I will not be investing in family business ventures. Any further attempts to access my personal information or accounts will result in legal action. I remain open to rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms if you can respect these boundaries. The response was swift and explosive. Mom called in tears, claiming I was destroying the family with my selfishness. Dad sent a lengthy email about ungrateful children who forget their roots once they achieve success. Thomas went further, showing up at my workplace and creating a scene that required security intervention. The security footage of Thomas's workplace confrontation proved valuable when I filed for a temporary restraining order against him. The judge granted it after reviewing the pattern of escalating behavior, including the unauthorized investigation and threats regarding the company acquisition. The situation took an even more disturbing turn when I received a call from a cousin warning me that my parents were consulting with a lawyer about claiming I was mentally unstable and unable to manage my financial affairs. Their apparent plan to seek some form of conservatorship was not only deeply hurtful but demonstrated how far they were willing to go to gain control of my assets. Attorney Alvarez immediately sent cease and desist letters to my parents and several extended family members who had been involved in the pressure campaign. The letters clearly outlined the potential legal consequences of continued harassment, unauthorized access to financial information, or defamation regarding my mental health. For 3 months, I maintained complete communication silence with my immediate family. It wasn't easy. Years of conditioning had taught me to seek their approval, to respond to their needs, to accept their treatment as normal. Dr. Winters helped me recognize that the guilt I felt was programmed, not earned. During this period, information still filtered through to me via more distant relatives. Aunt Catherine, my mother's sister who had always been slightly removed from family politics, called to let me know my parents had been openly discussing their plans for Garrett's money at a recent gathering. They were talking about renovating their house, buying a vacation property in Florida, and financing Thomas's new business venture, she said, sounding uncomfortable. I thought you should know. It doesn't seem right, the way they're acting. This conversation led to a disturbing revelation. My parents had accumulated significant debt funding Thomas's previous failed business attempts. Their retirement savings had been depleted not by medical expenses or necessary costs, but by continuously bailing out their golden child from his financial missteps. Thomas, meanwhile, had taken to social media with thinly veiled posts about family betrayal and blood being thicker than water. He portrayed himself as the victim of a successful brother who had abandoned his family responsibilities. A few distant relatives and family friends commented with supportive messages, having heard only his twisted version of events. Standing firm against this pressure wasn't easy. There were nights I lay awake questioning my decisions, wondering if I was overreacting, if family obligation should indeed trump my own well-being. But each new manipulation tactic only confirmed I was making the necessary choice for my mental health and future. The first small victory came unexpectedly. Aunt Deborah, the same aunt who had visited fishing for financial assistance, sent me a heartfelt email apologizing for her behavior. I've been watching how everyone is treating you, she wrote, and it's not right. Success should be celebrated, not exploited. I'm sorry I participated in this, even peripherally. If you ever want to talk, just as family, no financial discussions involved, I'd like that. Her message was the first acknowledgement from anyone in my family that what was happening wasn't normal or acceptable. It provided validation that I wasn't crazy for protecting myself, that the boundaries I'd established were reasonable and necessary. As the months passed, the intensity of the campaign against me gradually diminished. The legal cease and desist letters had their intended effect. The overt pressure tactics stopped, though the emotional manipulation attempts continued in more subtle ways. Through it all, I maintained my boundaries with the support of Dr. Winters, Attorney Alvarez, and friends like Devin who provided the genuine care my biological family had failed to demonstrate. For the first time in my life, I was prioritizing my own well-being over the approval I had desperately sought but never received. 6 months of no contact with my immediate family created space for reflection and healing. The constant anxiety that had plagued me since Thomas's investigation began gradually subsided, replaced by a growing sense of peace and self-assurance. Dr. Winters helped me recognize that my worth wasn't tied to my family's approval or my financial success, but to my authentic self and the genuine connections I formed. During this period, I focused on building what Dr. Winters called a family of choice, deep, meaningful relationships with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. Devin remained my steadfast support, along with colleagues who became close friends and new connections made through community involvement. My new apartment offered not just improved security but a fresh start. Unlike my previous Spartan living space, I allowed myself to create a home that reflected my personality and interests. Nothing ostentatious. Luxury for its own sake still held no appeal, but comfortable, thoughtfully designed spaces where I could relax and entertain friends. As I settled into this new chapter, I began considering how to use my resources meaningfully. The wealth that had become a source of family conflict could be directed toward positive impact. After considerable research, I established a scholarship fund for students pursuing cybersecurity education who lacked financial resources, creating opportunities for others who, like me, might need to forge their own path without family support. The first meaningful reconnection with extended family came through my cousin Ryan, Aunt Deborah's son. Unlike others who had approached me with thinly veiled financial motives, Ryan reached out simply to share that he understood my situation. "My dad was kind of the Thomas in our family dynamic," he explained during a long phone conversation. "I know what it's like to be measured against an impossible standard and always come up short. What they're doing to you isn't right." This conversation opened the door to a genuine relationship based on mutual understanding rather than obligation or advantage. Ryan became a bridge to the parts of my family who were beginning to recognize the dysfunction in how I had been treated. 7 months into my self-imposed family separation, I received a letter from my parents. Unlike their previous communications filled with guilt trips and thinly veiled demands, this one contained something I had never truly received from them. An acknowledgement of wrongdoing. "We've been doing a lot of thinking," the letter read in my father's handwriting. "While we still believe families should support each other, we recognize that our approach to your success was inappropriate. The methods we used to learn about your finances and the pressure we applied were wrong. We miss having you in our lives and are willing to respect the boundaries you've set if it means rebuilding some form of relationship." The letter wasn't perfect. There were still subtle implications that I should eventually provide financial assistance, and the apology focused more on their methods than their underlying attitude. But it represented the first step toward potential healing. Thomas, however, remained entrenched in his resentment. He refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing, maintaining that I had abandoned the family out of selfishness. Through mutual connections, I learned he continued to portray himself as the victim while simultaneously pursuing new business ventures he hoped to eventually fund with family money. The contrast between my parents' tentative steps toward reconciliation and Thomas's continued hostility highlighted an important realization: healing relationships wasn't an all-or-nothing proposition. I could potentially rebuild limited contact with my parents on new terms while maintaining firm boundaries with my brother. After discussing the letter with Dr. Winters, I responded to my parents with cautious openness. I acknowledged their effort to repair the relationship but reiterated my non-negotiable boundaries. Any renewed contact would need to exclude discussions of my finances, and respect for my privacy was essential. Our first meeting, a lunch at a neutral restaurant, was awkward but civil. Conversation remained superficial, carefully avoiding the financial elephant in the room. My mother seemed genuinely interested in my daily life for perhaps the first time, while my father struggled more visibly with the new dynamic. When Thomas's name inevitably arose, I calmly but firmly changed the subject, establishing that he wasn't a topic I was willing to discuss. These careful steps toward a redefined relationship with my parents taught me that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. I could acknowledge their efforts to change while maintaining the boundaries necessary for my well-being. Trust, once broken, couldn't be instantly restored. It would need to be rebuilt gradually through consistent respect for my limits. Throughout this journey, I've learned profound lessons about the nature of relationships, success, and self-worth. I discovered that genuine connections aren't based on what you can provide, but on mutual respect and care. I learned that privacy isn't selfishness, and that healthy boundaries are essential to meaningful relationships. Perhaps most importantly, I realized that family isn't solely defined by blood but by how people treat each other. The unwavering support of friends like Devin during my darkest moments showed me what genuine care looks like: present without expectation, supportive without extraction. My financial success, once a source of pride, then a source of conflict, has now become simply one aspect of my life, neither defining my worth nor determining my relationships. I've learned to appreciate the security it provides while recognizing that true wealth lies in authentic connections and inner peace. The road ahead with my family remains uncertain. My parents continue to take small steps toward healthier interaction, though old patterns occasionally resurface. Thomas remains distant, his resentment apparently too entrenched to overcome. I've accepted that some relationships may never heal completely, and that's okay. What matters is that I've found peace independent of their approval or acceptance, something I never thought possible growing up as the overlooked second son. I've built a life rich in meaningful connections, purposeful work, and genuine self-acceptance. If my story resonates with you, perhaps you've experienced similar family dynamics or struggled with setting boundaries. Remember that protecting your well-being isn't selfish, it's necessary. True family, whether biological or chosen, supports your growth without demanding access to your resources or violating your boundaries. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story helped you feel less alone in your own family struggles, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect themselves, even from those closest to them. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength and clarity in navigating your own relationships.